how to help our kids. Well, the first thing, what I'm going to talk about here isn't how to heal people with autism. It's how to work with kids. Because people with autism, at least the kids with autism, are kids. And that's the major problem we have is that we don't know how to deal with kids. And there was a book out a while ago, that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So I figured if men are from Mars and women are from Venus, the children are from Pluto, because at least Mars and Venus are planets and they follow a certain orbit. We got rules. This, Pluto thing is not even, we don't even know what to call it, and it's zooming all around out there, and, that's kind of, we have to understand that kids aren't adults. So how can we understand children with autism when we don't even understand children in general? As different as men and women are, children are even more so. We constantly anthropomorphize children. We act as if they are adult humans when they aren't. And we act as if they have personalities when they don't. So this is a huge oversimplification. But we can think about it as if, in terms of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, women need to feel connected. That is a primary need that many women have. And it's true of men too, but sort of the classic understanding is that women need to feel connected, men need to feel free, and children need to feel safe. And miscommunication and problems arise when we're trying to give children freedom or connectedness, and what they really want is safety. So they will interpret our attempts to give them freedom or connectedness as, hey, who's in charge here? And then they'll become anxious. So Abraham Maslow, this is another developmental scheme. Abraham Maslow came out with this a long time ago, and he determined this hierarchy of needs, with each higher need arising only after the earlier one is sufficiently met. If an earlier need is threatened, we naturally fall back to that level. So the first need is physiological. And for most of us, that's, have I had enough to eat? Have I had something to drink? Do I get enough sleep? But for autistic children, it's also, am I having some kind of a physical reaction to something? Or is my brain processing things in a way that allows me to really understand and sort things? So the physiological needs have to be met before they can go into dealing with safety needs. So once they go into dealing with safety needs, that's where most of these children are. Their focus is on safety. How am I going to be safe? What's making me safe in this environment? And then after safety is taken care of, then we worry about belongingness. And only after belongingness, do you care about me? I love you. And only after that do we get to esteem. I really want to make something of my life. I want to be a useful human being. And everybody can go to any of these levels, but depending on what threats they're dealing with, they're going to be focusing on one level over another. And children typically are dealing with safety, and especially autistic children are dealing with safety or physiological. So I'm going to be talking more about this in a little bit, but what I've got here are the needs of children on the one side, and I've put it next to Maslow's hierarchy. So the biggest need for children is exercise. Now, most people don't usually think about that, and most of the time our children don't get that much exercise anymore, especially many autistic children, because it's hard to take them out and do things with them. But exercise is where we pattern our neurology. It's where we get rid of our anxious energy. It's where we learn to interact with others. And then after exercise is limits and boundaries. What is the structure within which I can function? If those limits are too wide, I'm going to become anxious. If they're too narrow, I'm going to become frustrated. And as you can see, that exercise goes with the physiological level. Limits and boundaries goes with the safety level. The role is that each child needs to have a role in the family. And it's not really up to us whether they get to have a role. Each child is going to have a role, and if we don't give it to them, they're going to find it for themselves. So in a lot of families, maybe there's a good child, the nice one who's always there being helpful. And then there's another child who comes in. Well, the children can't share roles for some reason. I don't know why this is. But if there's one good child, then the other child has to have a role. And if we can't help them find the role themselves, they might choose the one that is opposite. So we might have one good child and one bad child, or one good child and one angry child, or one that's respectful and one that's acting out all the time. That the children are going to move into roles that serve the family in some way. And that's what family therapy is all about. And then last on this list is affection. And if you look at the list, though, you'll think, well, why does affection go at the bottom? And the reason affection goes at the bottom is because it's so powerful. Affection is the thing that drives everything. That whatever you give affection to, you get more of. So even though it's, heretical to say it, if your child is curled up in a ball and crying, and you spend a lot of time nurturing that, you very often will get more of that. That affection is a powerful drug. It's a powerful thing for shaping behavior, because children at these earlier stages don't understand affection in the way that we do. It's just a positive thing that they want more of. And whatever we give it to, we get more of. So, again, this is just another way of looking at it, that we need to spend a lot of time focusing on exercise, limits and boundaries, helping them find a role, and then giving affection where it's appropriate. So children don't want to be bad, they want to be safe. I think that if everyone could have that tattooed on the inside of their eyelids, it would really help in terms of figuring out how to deal with these kids. They don't want to be bad, they want to be safe. And anxiety arises from confusion. Confusion is related to the complexity and lack of leadership. Anxiety and confusion are the basic building blocks for all psychiatric conditions. Children become dominant in dysfunctional ways when faced with too much complexity and too little calm, assertive leadership. All children are primarily driven by a need to feel safe, because when they don't feel safe, they feel anxious. In children, all problem behavior is driven by a need to feel safe, because we interpret their attempts to introduce limits, boundaries, and control into our lives. They don't work. This leads to frustration, confusion, and anxiety. So what this means, how you would see this in your own family is, if you go to your child and you say, well, do you want to go to the park, or do you want to stay here, or what do you want to do? At a certain developmental level, that kind of open question causes stress, because it's too complicated for the child to figure out. So we think that we're being nice and kind and giving them freedom, and the child is like anxious. And what does the child do when he becomes anxious? He looks to see who's in charge. Is there some strong leader around here that's going to be able to tell me what to do? If he doesn't see that leader, he'll become the leader. And he'll say, no, I don't want to do any of that. And he'll start to scream and holler, and he'll decide what he wants to do. And then you're off to the races in terms of having to deal with his negative behavior. But most of that negative behavior that we see in these kids is about dominance, is about being in charge. So the components of safety. Someone trustworthy must be in charge. If there's no leader, the child will lead. And this is one of the problems that I have with a lot of the way kids are dealt with in schools. Because there's such a focus on independence in schools that, especially with kids with autism, they don't understand that these kids calm down and get more organized when they have a leader. Without that leader, then they're on their own. And they start to be, their impulsive minds start to sort of bounce around. And then the teachers feel like they're always having to stop them, to sit on them, to give them limits. And that's because they don't yet have a trustworthy person that's in charge. And the child needs to know what to do and when. If this is unclear, the child becomes upset or will choose for himself, which then makes him feel unsafe. And especially for kids that don't have much language, that's why we need to use things like picture flow charts, ways of knowing, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. You can see the anxiety come in. Once they learn the pattern and they understand that people are in charge, the anxiety calms down and they're able to be compliant. So, with all of us, our needs are not open to negotiation. Telling a child that you're the parent and that you're in charge means nothing if you don't act the part. Telling a child who is upset that that you'll help him with it tomorrow doesn't mean anything. Explaining that you're too tired to be in charge right now and that you'll do a better job of it in the morning doesn't mean anything, even though God knows we all want to say that. The children need to know who's in charge through their behavior. So I'm going to show some more little video clips in a minute. And the first one I'm going to show is from Cesar Millan. And many of you might know who he is. He's the dog whisperer from television fame. And I don't want you to see this and think that I'm saying that your children are like dogs. What I want you to do is I want you to see that if this stuff works for dogs, it works for people too. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be showing you videos that have Cesar Millan doing some of this with his dog, has Super Nanny doing some of this with typical kids, and has someone doing gentle teaching with autistic children. And hopefully what you'll be able to see is the same concepts expressed at the different levels of thought. So Cesar Millan talks about it as the universal language of energy. He says that all animals, including humans, are in constant communication through this medium, whether they know it or not. And he believes that by controlling your state, you can control your communication. Psychologists use a different word. Psychologists would label what Millan describes as energy as state. States are internal ways of feeling and perceiving that can be triggered by external events, but are really internal neurophysiological processes. And you can also call them, many people call these feelings like anxious, calm, angry, spacey, happy, frustrated. One of the great failings of classic behaviorism is that it targets behaviors rather than states. States precede and drive behavior. So if you get anything from this part of the talk, it's understanding the difference between behavior and states, that we're trying to impact the child's state of mind, not so much the specific behaviors. So here's Susan.
Rehabilitating a dog is not about fixing it. As Caesar says, a dog is not an appliance, simply to be sent out and repaired. Rehabilitation is about you, the owner, projecting the correct, calm, assertive energy that proves you are the leader. Dogs pick up on feelings of fear, self-doubt, or worry, and they will move to fill any void in leadership by attempting to become dominant.
It's not so much the dog who's changing, it's definitely you. You have to change very minor things that you do. For example, walking out the door first instead of the dog walking out the door. When he goes on a walk, make sure he's calm beforehand. And when you do those minor little things, you know, the whole world changes for a dog.
Practice unwavering leadership every day, especially on your walk. The energy you're projecting internally is the message you're sending to your dog.
I just learned about the walk, or about making sure that he knows I'm the boss. And
it's not an intellectual or it's not part of our psychology. It's really part of our neurology, and that's why it's so important to shape this part.
Case number 1 is Harley.
Harley is a purebred German Shepherd. My wife and I, we've raised 3 children, and we're kind of pushovers, I guess you could say. You know, we like giving the kids what they want, so we just went with it with Harley. We noticed right away that he had a mind of his own.
He doesn't listen. When you tell him down, he doesn't listen. And now it's a game. It's definitely a game, but there's, how do you stop him?
The first thing we noticed was that when we went to put him away, he would throw himself on the ground. Someone comes to the door, let's say, he'll go barking and be aggressive toward the door.
So if we won't be able to catch him. He barks like crazy.
He scares everybody.
Come on.
Hey.
Hi, Caesar.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi, Caesar.
How are you, sir? How you doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you. Nice to
Sit. Sit, Harley. Sit.
All right, so this is it? This is his normal self?
Usually we put him out before we answer the door.
Oh.
If we can.
How would you try to control this behavior?
Well, normally we just take him and put him out back, but it's hard to catch him because when he gets in this mode, as soon as he comes to the door,
no,
we can't control him. He starts running all around the house away from us.
Okay, so just the way he's holding the leash is setting the dog to become a weapon. You know, the dog is definitely letting them know that it's somebody in the house, somebody new and everything, but because there's tension behind the leash, this intensifies the learner behavior. And this is why we have this now confrontational behavior. That's what I'm doing, avoidance. I'm not giving eye contact to him, I'm just totally ignoring him. So there's no feedback from me. It's like he's not here, so to speak. You will see me do this again and again. When I first meet a dog, I don't make eye contact with the dog. Here we have a case where there's no leadership in the house. If you're not your dog's pack leader, your dog won't respect you. He might trust you, but he won't respect you. What I want to do right now is to show him, by me holding the leash, and show him how to hold the leash properly, how to bring the dog to the door, and the dog bringing the owner to the door. Because this is the problem right here. This is really the main problem, why this dog is in control of the situation. When a dog is in front of you, he is your leader. If you don't mind, just wrap the leash. Short leash. Next to me. Because remember, next to you means he's in a follower position. If you are here and he's in front, you are in a follower position. Mm-hmm. So if he walks towards the door, you are following. You're just holding the leash.
You're right.
And the tension that you're putting is intensifying the excitement. So it's excitement plus territorial behavior that creates aggression. Then you walk towards the door. Right here. Towards. Right here. Sit down. There we go. Then you open door. Come on. Right here. This can, right here. There you go. He can't move towards anything. This is the behavior. Door open means relaxation. So there's no tension on the leash, as you notice. The magic today, Hope, is that you guys understand that your dog don't respect you.
Right.
See it? It's not that he can't perform. It's not that he can't understand rules, boundaries, limitations. It's not that he can't live in the now. It's that you guys got a clear vision that your dog does not respect you.
So what you see there is how he applies these same concepts to dogs. And if it works for dogs, it works for children. And I'll tell you, very often when families come to me with their kid, whether they have autism or not, and they say, my kid is out of control, the kid invariably is acting like Harley. The kid has figured out ways of being in charge in a dysfunctional way. And one of the things that I often say about kids with disabilities in general is that they have a way of turning every interaction into tag. You know, so that they're running around and you're chasing after them, or they're doing something and then you're having to deal with it. And the reason that they turn everything into tag is because tag is the simplest game. It's an interactive game that involves relationship, but it's at such a simple level that they can figure it out. And so then everything becomes tag. And they wind up being in charge of the game rather than the parent. And so a lot of parents hate it when I talk to them about this, because what I usually am talking to them about is how they can be calm and assertive with their child's dominant behavior. And very often, especially with kids with disabilities, parents feel guilty about their child's disability, and so they're not setting the limits and boundaries at a tight enough level for the child to be able to relax. And they feel like by setting these limits and boundaries, they're somehow being mean to the child, when in fact, what it does is it calms them down and allows them to become nice. So a lot of these parents will describe to me how, well, when they become mean, their children become nice. And when they're being nice, their children are mean. So here's the similar concept with Joe Frost, who's Super Nanny. And what's interesting about Super Nanny, if you watch her shows, she does the same thing that the Dog Whisperer does. She just doesn't talk about it as well as he does.
Where are you going?
I was going out for a couple minutes.
What?
Almost immediately, Mum's New York schedule meant that she needed to run some errands. Ryan started to kick off.
All right, so I'll be home, okay, in a couple minutes. You won't even know that I'm
Ryan,
Why are you gonna go out?
listen to me. Listen to me. Come here. Come here. Ryan, come here. Come here. Ryan, come here for a second.
Instead of Mum just leaving, she fed into this whole temper tantrum that he was having.
Ryan, come on. It's okay.
I'm gonna check the mail. I have to go up the street for a couple of minutes.
I
and then I'm
want to
gonna come
go
back.
with you.
He wanted to know where I was going, when I was going, when I was going to come home. Can he come with me? And that happens every day.
Do you want to give me the special kiss hug? Okay.
You know, I feel bad because, you know, I want to be with him, but I do have places to go. I have to be at work, so it's hard.
You know what? When I come back, we'll all go out. We'll all go outside, and you can come up.
So there's a stage 3 child, and he's in charge. And the parent, because she feels guilty, isn't giving him the limits and boundaries that he needs in order to be able to organize and take effective action. So what we need to do when we're working with our children is we need to focus on their state, not on their behavior. We make our children crazy by rewarding states that are not calm submissive. So that woman who was nurturing her child who's having a fit is going to wind up getting more of that. You know, you can certainly understand why you would want to nurture a child who's crying, but paradoxically, it winds up giving you more of that crying. When we give love or food or toys to a child who is anxious or confused, we unintentionally reinforce that state. That doesn't mean that we don't want to help the kids who are upset, but first we want to encourage a positive state, a calm state, and then reinforce that. We don't want to give a lot of reinforcement to the negative screaming, tantruming state, because that's just going to make it last longer. Any of you who've seen kids with tantrums, you know, a kid can have a tantrum that goes on for hours if you sit there and try to deal with it. If you walk away, they'll get over it pretty quickly. And that has to do with what it is we're reinforcing. And then once the kid is over that tantrum, that's when we want to give them the help and support and nurturing and love. You know, we don't want to consecrate the child when they're over it. We just want to separate ourselves from that tantrum so that we're not giving energy to it, as Susan Milan would say. You know, as the dog was barking at him, he was looking all over. He was not looking at the dog because the dog was having a tantrum. So children respond with calm submission. That's what we want from children, is calm submission. And we don't want it because we're nasty Hitlers. We want it because only calm, submissive children are happy children. Children who are dominant are always anxious, angry, and agitated, and they can't be calm for long. They go from demand to demand without pause. The thing is not important. It's the illusion of safety that the control brings which drives the behavior. So especially kids who are at the lower levels, who are in like stage 2 or stage 3 of ego development, they always want stuff. There's never a moment that they're not wanting something. And that's not because they need those things. It's because they're externally focused and because in getting you to help them do it, they're dominant. They're the leader. And so they don't have to be as anxious about what's going to happen. Because at least somebody's in charge. They are. So when we give too many choices or unclear direction, we're putting the child in charge.
This for breakfast. So let's have, you could have apples or Cheerios or cheese or yogurt.
No!
Do you want a sandwich? I can make a turkey.
No!
I can make a turkey and cheese.
This clip actually goes on for a rather long time, and it drives me crazy, so I had to set a limit here. But it's if you interact with a child, giving them too many choices, it makes them anxious. And so then they've got to be in charge. So it's also what's important is our state, not our words. Our children learn not to listen when our behavior is different than our state. Only calm, assertive states work to achieve calm submission. So a lot of times they say it's your behavior that's important. And that's true because usually our behavior flows from our state, but really it's our state that's important. And you can test this if you have an autistic child because they know your state before you do. If you're stressed, or you're angry, or you're really sad, they know it as soon as you walk in the room. The only thing is they're going to punish you for it because they usually haven't figured out that that state is yours. Instead, they're feeling it and they're getting upset because they don't have the perceptual filters to be able to separate you from them yet. So they're picking up on your upset. And so what they're looking for is calm assertiveness. So here's a good example of this.
My shoe.
Throwing shoes and not minding mum at all, that's not a good start.
That's enough. Harper, stop. Stop.
I saw that mum couldn't control the two sets of twins' behaviour. So then when dad tried to do it, I saw that he couldn't do it either.
Hey, Parker, we don't do that.
Get down off of that, guys. Do I need to get rid of that thing? Sydney. Okay, guys. This is getting, oh, Parker. No, Peyton, please get down.
He begs the children to be quiet.
Please. Can you guys just be good?
And they look at him and laugh.
Sydney, don't do it again.
And then ignore him and carry on doing what they were doing in the first place.
Come on, Sydney, please.
I mean, it really is this whining tone.
Sydney.
Kind of like a broken record, really.
Can you stay down off of that? Please, please, please. Okay, Sydney, come on.
So what's interesting about that is the state of the two parents. It's pretty obvious that, especially Dad, is pretty wimpy. And, you know, that's an official state now. And that wimpy behavior gets dominant behavior. And these kids have figured out how to turn Dad into a ride at the, you know, I mean, he's fun. Climbing up on this, having Dad take you down, climbing up on it, having Dad take you down. It's enjoyable for them. And it's at a simple level, which is where these kids are. They're not playing a complex game here. They're pulling Dad into their game because they're in charge. So, without understanding the concept of energy, states, or attitude, we focus on behavior. The result is that we're always too late to effect useful change. The state changes before the behavior. If we learn to pick up on changes in state, we gain authority. If we use discipline without understanding state, we're ineffective and become abusive. Discipline is not to punish, but to establish who is in charge. So, you also have to understand that children and animals don't live in time in the same way that we do. Time is a construct of the mind that's not shared by animals, young children, and many people with disabilities. Without time, a child needs help with transitions. Without time, a child becomes easily confused by complex interaction. Unless a child knows that someone else is in charge, these issues can lead to anxious, dominant behavior and an unstable mind. So, what you're all probably thinking about now is, who's in charge of my house? The easiest way to be able to figure it out is, when going out, who leaves first? I can't tell you how many families come to me who have kids with autism who basically say, well, I can't take them anywhere anymore. We pretty much don't go out because as soon as I take him out the door, he's running. I can't keep track of him. And it's because of they haven't sufficiently communicated to a child that they're in charge so they can pattern compliant behavior. So, when going out, who leaves first? Who decides when to eat? Who decides what to eat? Who decides when to go to bed? Who decides where to go to bed? In other words, who is leading? This doesn't mean that you want to always be, absolutely in charge of every little thing. But you want the child to be comfortable with the fact that you're the leader. If the child decides, then he or she is in charge. As the children mature, we let go of these controls, but with disabled children, this may not occur until adulthood. So it's kind of like teaching your child how to ride a bike. First you put training wheels on the bike and a helmet on the kid, and you're standing right there next to them as they're learning to ride. After a while, you step back a little bit, they still have the training wheels, they still have the helmet, and then, you can run up if you need to. You're constantly putting boundaries and limits in to their level of competence, and then slowly backing off. And then if it seems like they can't handle that, you're moving in so that the kid doesn't fall over and hurt themselves. And after a while of doing this, after a while the training wheels come off, but then you're closer in, and then you're backing up. so that you're structuring their world so that they can become successful and not fail. So what we need to do is to take charge with calm assertiveness. Angry assertive doesn't work. And it especially doesn't work with disabled kids. If kids are at like stage 1 or stage 2 and you become angry with them, they think it's hilarious. If they're in stage 3, they still don't know what to do with that. And instead, they'll feel the anger in themselves and use it back on you. We want to reward calm, submissive energy. And we want to watch for that calm submissiveness and reward it with affection, praise, or even treats. You want to catch your kid being calm, submissive. And you want to correct agitated or dominant energy through redirection and consequences early on. So that most of your interaction is positive. You're just giving them little corrections in order to calm down, and then you're rewarding. And you'll see some videos. And you mostly don't want to let your child be your boss. Many parents have become calm compliant to their child's angry dominance. You don't want to reward the child's dominance with compliance. In other words, if they're yelling at you, give me this, that's not the time to give it to them. You want to demand compliance first. So if there's something the child wants, that is your window of opportunity. Because these children always want something. So if they want something, you have to have them do something for you first. Because at that level of ego development, they can understand and exchange like this. So if you want whatever this is, then you got to help me pick up these toys first. Now, some kids with autism, they can't even do that. You know, picking up toys would be asking too much, would be too complicated for them. But you can say, come sit down next to me for a minute, and then we can go do it. So that what you're doing is you're helping them calm, and then you're doing it. Everything is about, it's kind of like a dance. It's a calming dance in which you take the child's anxiousness, you give them limits and boundaries, you calm them down, you get them focused on doing something, and then you move them out. Your child always wants something. Use this wanting to shape calm, compliant states. So, and again, here's that children's hierarchy of needs. We're really focusing on the most important ones. I haven't really talked about exercise, but I think everybody knows what exercise is. Kids really need it, and our schools aren't giving it to them anymore. So that means at home, we need to be able to structure the exercise even more so that they can successfully get their energy out. Even if it's just walking, they need to be able to do that. And then limits and boundaries are all reflection. So I think I've gone over these. There you go. So, and also you need to remember that influences to negative behavior exist in layers. There's biological, physiological roots to all behavior. These roots influence a child's state control and resulting emotions and thoughts. These determine a child's perception. This influences the child's intentional choices. So very often if you have a child and he's a happy child, he's doing well in school, you know, you're not having any problems with him, and then all of a sudden one day he's upset all the time, we tend to look for psychological reasons. We tend to look for, well, what did so-and-so do to you? Or what was the behavioral interaction that caused this? And especially with kids with autism, it may not be a psychological reason. It's quite likely to be a biological, physiological, or neurological reason. In other words, they might be having an allergic response to something in the air that's taxing their system and causing them to drop down to a lower level of ego development. So we want to be sensitive all the time to what's driving this negative behavior, rather than just assuming that the kid's being bad. Because once we assume the kid's being bad, all we can do is consequate that kid. And consequences don't work as well as anything else. You know, in the field of dog training and behavioral dog training, consequences is the last thing that they usually do. So you begin with biology, attending to allergies, infections, diet, sleep, and exercise reduces the stress in the child's system, allowing him to remain calm and organized in more complex situations. And this is true of us. You know, people who get depressed, for example, one of the best treatments for depression is exercise. You need to be in charge of what, when, and how of his eating and his sleeping. Only calm, compliant behavior should be reinforced with these primary reinforcements. And you need to have a developmentally focused treatment. All behavioral and psychotherapeutic treatment must be sensitive to the person's developmental level. Ego development is not a function of IQ. I usually assume that any kid who comes in to see me is at least as intelligent as I am. The problem isn't intelligence, it's developmental level. So they might be smarter, but I can think more complexly. So it's a way of being able to figure out what level they're at and gradually expand the complexity that they can handle so that they can gain control over their own behaviors and emotions. So each level of ego development reflects a very different worldview, and no one willingly moves from a lower to a higher stage because of anxiety and fear of loss. So a kid who's at stage 2 always wants something. And he's going to resist going to stage 3. He's going to resist caring about other people because he's got this idea that if I care about you, then how am I going to make you give me what I want? He doesn't grasp that if you have a positive relationship, more is going to happen. You know, he's going to get more. Because the higher levels of ego development are all more complex and so can't be understood from below. So we can understand their ego development, but it's hard for them to understand ours because it's too complicated. So here's some examples of the importance of developmental level. Children who are stuck in level 1 require repeated direct interaction to develop level 2 awareness. So this is where, you know, intensive behavioral approaches are very useful because these children are in a world that doesn't have stimulus and response yet. It's just this blissful place that they're living, and they don't want to leave it. So they require consistent interaction in order to pull them out. Children who are stuck at the beginning of level 2 require physical reinforcement because other people don't yet exist for them. So giving them kisses and hugs to someone who's at the beginning of level 2 is often not, they don't care because they haven't really understood that you matter yet. As that stage progresses, then you know, affection matters. But in the very beginning, they respond better to food, to things, to tickles, to sensory spinning and things like that. That until people matter, people don't matter. Children in higher levels of level 2 require social feedback and reinforcement to develop models of other. And Stanley Greenspan and his techniques are terrific for kids at this level. Children in level 3 require social feedback, limits, and consequences with a relationship focus. So you'll notice you don't see me talk about consequences until we get to level 3. Because prior to level 3, consequences don't make much sense. Until a child understands the connection between stimulus and response, giving them a consequence doesn't matter much. Well, there's the slide. So autistic children aren't equipped to learn from consequences until they hit stage 3. First, they have to be called into our reality. Then they have to learn to connect their action to the environmental reaction. And then they have to learn that they're not alone in the world. And so you want to encourage always the state you want, which is calm compliance. It's always the state you're looking for. Everything else needs to sort of bounce off of that. And most important is you need to gain your child's respect. And somehow in America we don't talk about this very much. But at lower levels of ego development, respect is very important. And it's something that is earned, not given. Respect is not negotiated, it's claimed. If you have your child's love and not his respect, you see dominant behavior.
The magic today, Hope, is that you guys understand that your dog don't respect you.
Right.
See it? It's not that he can't perform. It's not that he can't understand rules, boundaries, limitations. It's not that he can't live in the now. It's that you guys got a clear vision that your dog does not respect you.
And so here's someone doing pretty much the same thing, only this is someone who's using gentle teaching with a child who has really quite profound autism with a lot of powerful obsessive negative behavioral issues.
Heavy. Heavy, and get him out there. What do you think?
Heavy duty.
Duty, heavy duty, that's right.
I mean, like spitting, kicking, pinching, going for women's breasts. You may have 3 at once.
Mm-hmm.
And it was real uncontrollable at home.
When did that start?
At age 2 or so when you started? The headbanging started at about 2, headbanging.
Was it pretty severe at the beginning?
Very severe. He would go down on a concrete sidewalk, tile floor, table edges, stool.
Jill, why don't you talk about what finally made you and Steve seek out residential treatment at, Bobby was 4 when he started at Adelaide, at the residential, what event led up to that? Did he go there?
We put him in a hospital and ran some tests on him. A psychiatrist. That was when the headbanging first started. The psychiatrist suggested we put him in a basement, playpen, padded, where he couldn't hurt himself and let him beat.
In your house?
Yeah, and he had a real bad incident happen right after he went into Adler. They evidently let him go and weren't watching him and didn't believe how bad this kid could be, and he got down on the tile floor and literally beat his head until it was pulp here in the front. The head was the size of a basketball. He was in the hospital 6 days, tubes everywhere. It was traumatic for me then. I wasn't even sure, hey, should I get this kid back into this program,
What kinds of, in the last 2-3 years, what kinds of treatment interventions have you gone through to try to decrease the self-injury?
First of all was the tasting. What was that called? Noxious tasting.
What was that?
What did we decide on? Was it vinegar or?
Tabasco sauce.
It wasn't a hot, no, our pharmacist wouldn't agree with that. I think it was just like a vinegar solution.
And then the shocking.
Speak to that.
Well, there was water missing.
Well, that wasn't,
that was certainly an aversive treatment, and you had some real qualms. We ran that all summer long,
but when it got cold, I put my foot down,
When was the hardest one, the electric shock?
Yeah.
What was it, a catapult?
Yeah.
what you can see on this is this child was in stage 2, hadn't really figured out that other very well. But because of the environment that he had lived in, he had become self-abusive and completely out of control of himself. So the limits and boundaries that he's being given by this man, who is, fabulous leader, when you think about it in terms of leadership, he's leading by essentially surrounding him, blocking all the negative action, and reinforcing all positive actions. And reinforcing that calm, compliant state. And this is a child, it was hard to hear on the audio, but the mother was in the background explaining how out of control this child was. And my understanding of this child is he was pretty much in 4-point restraints most of the time prior to getting help by this guy. And it's so most of our children don't need this level of support. We can do it a little bit further back, but they still require a great deal of leadership in order to be able to move through their day without becoming anxious. Stuff in there.
There you go. Good boy. That's the way. There you go. That's my big boy. Good going. Good going. Okay. Here we go. That's the way. That's good, Luke. That's good. Good. That's it. What a buddy. Good going. Good, Luke. You got it, buddy. Okay, here we go. That's it. Good going. All right. That's the way. Good. There you go. That's a big boy. Good. That's right. Right. Oh, and up it goes. Yay. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. Okay, what I want him to do. Okay. Good. That's it. Oh, boom. Okay. That's it. Good. Sloppy. You can lay it out. Put the hand on. Okay. He did a nice job. And then he doesn't have to learn how to do the both hands. Takes out. Good going, Luke. Here we go, buddy. Boom. You did it.
So here you can see, he's really targeting states, not behavior. And he's staying with the child, and as soon as he sees a shift from the sort of negative or avoidant behavior into something more positive, he's giving it lots of positive attention. And that's, in my opinion, the best way to be able to quickly move these kids into positive functional states. And it's important to remember that for children, nothing is more complicated. Therefore, nothing is scarier than having nothing to do. You know, as adults, we dream of the day in which we can sit around and do nothing. But for children, having nothing to do is scary. And so what nothing does is it triggers the impulsive mind. So it thinks bing, 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 and after a while, we're trying to stop them from doing their impulsive behavior. When you watch someone like the dog whisperer, or like this man with a kid with autism, they're always doing something. Because in the doing is where they're patterning the neurology. Because this isn't really about psychology. It's not learning something. It's patterning neurology, learning a calm mind. And so there's always something that you're doing, and in the doing of it is where the transformation happens. So you'll only want to allow positive states. Use your calm, assertive state and authority to shape the child's desired states. Ignore, redirect, block, or control negative behavior. Expect and encourage positive behavior. Reward calm, organized behavior with praise, activity, food, touch, etc. If a child is unresourceful, belligerent, anxious, or avoidant, see this as a need for firmer limits and more frequent positive feedback while remaining calm and positive yourself. So, in other words, just keep in your head the idea that if they're getting anxious, if you see that state start to escalate, it means you need to bring the limits in. And then watch them calm, and then back up again.
Hey. So after her, going away and, meeting the whole neighborhood through fences and all that stuff, that means this dog has no boundaries, So we are really in an environment where the dog has no rules, no boundaries, no limitations. So we applied the first rule, which is no jumping people. That went really good. Then when we went over to the next exercise, which opening the door, and allowing the dog to be in front to a certain stance, that's boundaries. But she has no boundaries, so she can actually go as far as she wants to go. Now, what I'm doing here is creating a consequence for what she did. So after her going in, to those 3 different homes, this is the consequence. Now the dog is relating that what she did is unwanted by me. Of course, the owner have to do the same thing. It's a consequence from misbehaving, and this is the consequence here. A lot of people, what they will do, they will send a dog into a timeout, right? A timeout is not a consequence in the animal world. This is a consequence in the animal world because the dominant one addresses himself to a follower right there. So it's not that I'm being harsh on it, it's just I disagree with what she did. So she has to stay in that state until I release her from it.
So, and this is with dogs. So if you can do something with dogs, you can do it with people. But what's happening is it's not being punished. There's no punishment involved in this consequence. The purpose of the consequence is to teach the dog, in this case, that who's in charge and that they need to be compliant in order to get what they want. So here's Super Nanny doing the same.
You guys need to get downstairs. Come on. Let's go. Here, let's move it.
No.
You know what? You're going to time. Let's go to timeout.
No, move it.
Let's go, guys.
No, move it.
You're going to sit here because I asked you to move. Sit. You in the chair because I asked you to get off the computer and it was time to move. I'll put your feet in my face. Hey, knock it off. You sit right there, and you're going to sit there until your 3 minutes are up. Before I would stand over them and yell, figuring that was the way to do it. And I used to threaten it all the time. They would get up, I'd get frustrated. They would break me down to the point where I was just like, forget about it. Oh.
Maddie got up a few times, he had to place her back again.
Okay, let's go back to the book. If they get back up, you don't say a word to them, sit them back down, and then you just do what you have to do.
So you put her back and the 4 minutes start all over again.
Now she's hiding behind the chair.
Well, it's neither here or there, but communication is none. And you just place her straight back into the chair. The importance of giving discipline without being angry leaves a parent in a place where they don't lose control.
So each time she does that 4 minutes, start all over again?
Start all over again.
That was effective. Nobody yelled, nobody screamed.
I put you in the chair because when I asked you to get off the computer, you told me to get lost. So that's naughty. So tell me you're sorry. Give me a kiss. Come here. You did good. If you would have told me a week ago that timeouts were effective, I would have told you you were crazy because I would have used the belt.
Not that we're not all tempted. But what's happening there isn't punishment. Okay? It's not that the child is being put in a timeout room and left there for long periods of time. It's only very brief, 4 minutes. Usually they say with typical children it's a minute per year of their age. But with people with disabilities, you never want to go over more than 4 minutes. But you want to do it once they're submissive, once they're calm and compliant. And so the only thing you're really caring about is that you're getting that calm, compliant response and that they're learning to follow. So timeouts provide limits and boundaries. The purpose of a timeout is to establish authority and compliance. This helps the child to feel safe as well as controlling his state remotely. Timeouts should not be used as a consequence, but as a tool for state control. You want to keep shifting limits and boundaries as the child matures. You gradually move from timeouts to counting. And one of the books that I really like, and it's a book for typical kids, I think 2 to 12 or something, which is 1, 2, 3 Magic. Very simple book that talks about how to get kids to stop doing negative behavior using counting, and then the more important thing, which is how to get them to start doing positive behavior. And so 1, 2, 3 Magic has videos and things. It's been around for a long time. It works really, really well. And the basic idea of it is teaching the child that you're in charge and you're giving them warnings. So that's 1, that's 2. If I get to 3, then there's going to be this consequence. So teaching a child that these warnings produce this result teaches the child to be compliant. You want hands-on guidance, timeouts, and counting are all tools for maintaining authority and state control. Gradually, limits and boundaries and state control become habitual or integrated, and greater freedom can be allowed. It's really a product of an organization of the mind. It's a neurological change that happens through patterning behavior. And progress ebbs and flows as the child responds to stressors. You want to stay positive, flexible, interested, curious, calm, assertive, and firm. This is as much about you as your child. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but it's really good news because it's a lot easier for us to learn this stuff than to expect them to have to learn it all. So most caregivers want to control the child so that the caregiver can feel better. We need to control ourselves so the child can feel better. So this is good news. Mostly, this is nonverbal and unconscious. You want to resist trying to interpret negative behavior. This confuses the children and makes them defensive. Children need to know why they are receiving a timeout or getting counted out or not getting what they want. And it shouldn't be really open to discussion or negotiation. Negative behavior should be ignored, redirected, or corrected without focusing undue attention on it. Because if we give it too much attention, we're going to get more of it. And that's one of the objections that I sometimes have to behavioral programming in schools is that the fact of that behavioral programming, because you're targeting negative behavior, you're often building that negative behavior because of where that attention's going. We want to be putting the attention on the positive, not on the negative. And I want you to see all of this, because a lot of people feel like what I'm telling people to do is to be really strict and mean, but I'm not. What I'm talking about is love. Some people become confused and think that calm assertiveness is not loving. Yelling, hitting, or becoming frustrated is more unloving. The bond of love and respect can be held during calm assertive parenting. Calm assertive parenting also elicits the loving response from the child in ways that permissiveness or anger do not. With safety, you are building belongingness and esteem. As safety needs are met, belongingness and esteem needs arise and are satisfied in the same way. Affection is not a replacement for belongingness. Children need to fill a role in the family and eventually in society. The role may be shaped by the parent with calm, assertive parenting. So it's useful to figure out what role you think the child should fill. One of the ones that parents with disabled kids really like is to have the child fill the helper role. Because you need, God knows we all need helpers, but also that keeps the child close enough that we can give them direction. And we can keep focused on doing things, because it's the doing things that helps them stay calm. So it's a matter of then having them help us with things. But they don't fill this role because we want them to. They fill it because we need them to. So if there's a role that you want your child to fill, you need them to do it. In other words, you can't do it if they don't do it. So one of the parents that I'm working with right now, the thing that she wanted more than anything is to have her son learn to peel potatoes. And it took her a long time to understand that if she's going to peel the potatoes, there's no reason that he would. There has to be a willingness to let that role go unfilled if you want someone to fill it. They'll only fill the role if there's a vacuum there. And that's how roles are done. And we need to understand that authority flows from our state.
Hi.
How are you, ma'am?
Shoshana?
Cesar Milan. Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, great pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So.
And this is Sadie.
Okay.
Usually she jumps. She's not jumping on you.
Right. They don't jump on anything that is a leader significant. They don't make the move. I move whenever I make the decision. It was my decision to move towards the door. Then I open door and I ask the person that I invite to come in. Right?
Right.
It was all triggered by me. He saw that I let that person come into my territory. If you don't claim your house, they claim the house.
Really? Now, how does this keep him from going out the door?
Oh, because it becomes a condition. It becomes a condition of the brain.
That's enough. Right now, that is enough. Okay? No crying, no temper tantrum. Okay? No pulling those faces.
2, 3, 4. That's 5. You did it. Good, huh? Oh, thank you.
Yay! Good boy. More. More. Good boy. Here you go. Boy, stop. More. Jump, 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 jump here. Okay. Let's go, toy. Toy. Good job. Oh, look, it's over there. Good boy. Good job. Oh, good. Good. Table. Yay! Good job, Luke. Good job.
So what you see there is the state of those people. Of course, they were using a lot of leadership, but they were all calm and assertive. There wasn't anybody getting angry. There wasn't anybody yelling, but there was a focus to the behavior, and there was leadership in terms of calmly moving the organism to where they wanted to go. So, in summary, autism is a complex cascade phenomenon beginning with an autoimmune response resulting in brain swelling. This leads to distorted neurological development, which then results in inhibited ego development. Treatments need to be aimed at the physical, neurological, and psychological causes. The ultimate goal of enhanced ego development depends largely on meeting the child's safety needs through appropriate limits, boundaries, and leadership.